Thank you so much, Mr. Keane, Mr. Dumfried. It's truly, ladies and gentlemen, my great privilege for being able to take part to this ICD annual conference on cultural diplomacy. And also let me at the very beginning express my true, sincere, heartfelt admiration for what you, Mark, and for what you, Tom, what you personally, your teams and your two organizations, the ICD and the Square Patent Box, do in a field I think is of a fundamental, and clearly both of your organization, each one in its own right, was able to understood the critical importance of cultural diplomacy, be it for the conduct of international affairs, for the exercise of influences among the countries and among the nations, as well as in the case of a respectable law firm, of doing business based upon the same premises. The same suppositions. So for the, if I may say, cultural diplomacy is not a synonym of soft power, but it's very much the uses instruments of soft power which are available to pursue the state interests among the states vis-a-vis each other. And it's truly in a symbiotic relationship with the hard power, like a yin and yang. Wherever you see an international effort, a relationship between two or more states, wherever you see a crisis, you see that what distinguishes success and failure is usually the fine balance between the amount of soft power and hard power one uses. I mean, with hard power, you can subjugate somebody, a country or your own people, and keep it subjugated for a while. But such a structure remains always fragile, unsustainable, and what gives it sustainability, and what gives it truly a full measure of a credible structure is a fine balance between the soft power you have, soft power being when it comes to the relations between the countries, very much the area of cultural diplomacy, and the hard power you have to have in order to exercise some influences in some instances or all the time, but in itself cannot provide the answer to everything, to all the needs you may be having. So it also throughout most of my career, I've been dealing with the instruments of hard power. Tom, you've been kind enough to say a few words about that. So that would maybe a reason why one would expect that I would be kind of not fully aware of the importance and of the benefits of the employment of the cultural diplomacy, of the soft power. This is certainly not the case. I mean, if I may share with you some of the lessons learned, some of the experiences I was able to pick up along my career route and my life route, then it's certainly the crucially important value of soft power, of cultural diplomacy, in a sense that in order to be able to exercise influence, for whatever reason you may wish to do that, you are basically operating in a world of ideas. You're trying to win hearts and minds. And in order to do that, you are necessarily in the field of cultural diplomacy. So that again, I truly wish to express my admiration for what your two organizations are doing, and for my really great privilege for being able to take part to this conference. What I would like to share with you is, again, as I said, few lessons learned, few experiences I was able to pick up along the way while doing what I was doing, which was again mostly related to the hard security, but with the full understanding that the soft power, relying upon cultural diplomacy, doing things in the field of ideas when it comes to the main elements forming a society, forming its way of life, forming its attractiveness, is something which is enabling you to influence other nation, other country very much in a fundamental fashion. Influence it with whatever reason you may be having in mind, to make it your ally, to make it pliable to your requests if you wish, on the other extreme. And in the case of experience of Croatia, I would like to maybe to focus on certain historical points which may nicely or less nicely, depending on my skill or lack of it in explaining it, illustrate the importance of these ideas. Let me start with the fall of communism. Fall of communism was fundamentally. I was lucky as a young journalist, getting a chance of basically covering the fall of communism throughout Eastern Europe and Russia, and also in our own country, which was former Yugoslavia at the time. The magnetism and the strength of Western liberal ideas, for example, of the U.S. at the time, of the liberalism, rule of law, democracy, freedom, liberty. What else there is? The alliances and solidarity among the Western world. The idea of the idea enshrined in the U.S. Constitution, if you wish, of freedom and liberty, of individualism, has such a tremendously important was such a tremendously important weapon in destroying communism. Basically, the communism was unable to respond in kind with anything meaningful. It was able to respond in kind when you're calculating ballistic strategic nuclear missiles, or even more than match the West when it comes to the number of main battle tanks or the artillery. But it was not able to win the war of ideas, and the war of ideas had been fought with the cultural diplomacy. I remember, for example, in my own country, Zagreb, Croatia, that one of the lighthouses of the democracy and of these things I'm talking about was the U.S. I remember it was at the time information center, something like that. When you were able to browse, it was way before internet, to read the books, to read newspapers, to see the during gloomy days of communism. Although the Croatia and Yugoslavia was maybe not the gloomiest part of the communist world, but it was gloomy, all right, compared with the true West. So the idea that these values exists, and that there is other life, other way of forming society, other way of make it more efficient, make it more friendly, make it more livable, was I wouldn't say that it was only as much as important as other big issues when it comes to the sovereignty, independence, or the security side of the story. But it was fundamental in destroying communism. And it was also a good case study because this kind of what we were unfortunately able to see later, when the vis-a-vis some other regions in the world, in which after the fall of certain totalitarian or authoritarian regimes, the success was not similar as throughout Eastern Europe. In Central and Eastern Europe, you had the fall of communism, which was within one generation replaced by imperfect, but by democracies, but by all the countries, or most of the countries, fully integrated into NATO and into EU. So, and by virtue of doing that, they were able to fulfill very stringent standards, requirements, and conditionalities to reform the judiciary, for example, which was very high on the agenda of all the countries, to make it independent and functional, to establish liberal democracy, free market, basically to be at the level of other countries of the old West. So all that has happened in less than a generation. So that has been a tremendous success. Imperfect one. I mean, the democracy itself is maybe not being maybe perfect. It is the best perfect thing we have in the real world. But it has hugely been a tremendous success. And when I look back, I remember what my dear friend Miomir Đurđel, Ambassador Đurđel, who was Foreign Affairs Minister of Croatia during a very critical moment when it was make or break of accelerating our accession to NATO, once wrote. And I remember what he wrote because I quoted him in one of my studies. And he said more to the effect that the values underpinning NATO, freedom, liberty, rule of law, transatlanticism, a stable international order, stable and peaceful international order, free market economy, were the same. The new Croatia, the newly independent Croatia, the Croats themselves as citizens were feeling as their own. So the fulfilling standards, all necessary standards for acceding to NATO, was hard. It was truly a hard work, but in a conceptual sense, it was not a problem. It was not problematic. It was not substantially conceptually problematic. It was a logical consequence requiring a hard work. So it was not very much an issue of whether we should or shouldn't be doing it. Is it in our interests, or we should go somewhere else? Are the values which are enshrined in the North Atlantic Charter, aforementioned values, are our own? Would be able to? Are we willing to make all the sacrifices, negotiating our entry to NATO and the EU, of course, or it is simply the mirror image of what we would like to achieve? The answer was a very simple one. Yes, I mean we consider ourselves spiritually, culturally part of the Western civilization all the time, cut out of it during decades of communism. All right, that has happened, but deep down inside, beneath the surface, that's what we had been all the time, and that's what we were during the times of dictatorship. That's what we remain. And during the years of communism, the cultural diplomacy, and the U.S. is by far had the strongest impact on the captive nations of communism. And the U.S. did it magnificently. I'm not talking at this moment what it did on the military side of the story, which was necessary, which was absolutely necessary to match the might of the Soviet Union, and create the balance and not the deterring Soviet Union from doing this militarily. But what tipped the balance, what was the most important thing, I would say, this year, that attractiveness of the U.S. as a model of an open society, as a model of also the internationally as an ally. What the U.S. was offering its future friends was that if you embrace freedom, liberty, democracy, it's not that you would be able also to enjoy a very special type of relationship with the mightiest of the countries, which is the U.S. So the U.S. During the years of communism did it magnificently. I think it remains very much a role model for how you do these things, vis-a-vis when it comes to that particular historic and cultural setting. This logic may not be universally applicable when it comes to the world is a very varied place. We have seen it all. We ourselves, we come from different countries, different types of societies. So we may think that there is truly a universal message the West has, led by the U.S. But this may not be necessarily the case, and we have seen that during the events in the Middle East and in Central Asia, when this logic has not been able to be played in full. So as I said, there are limits of hard power. Certainly there are limits, but there are also limits in the cultural diplomacy, in soft power, in terms of the amount of influence one is able to exercise by employing it. So one has to be more judicious, more careful in tailor-making the messages, tailor-making its own approach vis-a-vis taking into account the local specificities. there are some things which we are proud of, which we think that it is the main elements of our societies, may be considered as intrusive to some other societies, particularly, and then you are certainly creating then you are certainly not the underpinning and the supporting your hard power, but you are undermining. Basically, you end up undermining your effort because you are not making your soft power as useful as it can be if it can be fashioned out differently. But again, I'm not saying that the cultural diplomacy or any kind of diplomacy has an absolute ability to influence events. It is an instrument which is, again, in my humble professional experience, dealing again mostly with the hard security, be it as a journalist or as a government official, something which is of a fundamental importance, and it is of a fundamental importance in other aspects. We may have internet, we may have social media, we may have this or that, but the relationship between the states, they do boil down to the old-fashioned chemistry between the people who are making decisions at different levels, forming a cohesive tissue between the countries, and it's how they would be able to make that connections. Depends very much upon their ability to employ cultural diplomacy. Otherwise, they would not be able to correlate to each other if they are not finding a certain way of perceiving the other side as being friendly, attractive, not threatening, interesting. What else there is? Whatever you can imagine, what attracts people to each other. So we were able to. I'm just illustrating the most drastic example of a cultural diplomacy being employed vis-a-vis our nation, vis-a-vis Croatia, and vis-a-vis other, again, communist nations at the time, and then seeing the most positive and the most revolutionary, I would say, aspect of a success of such a cultural diplomacy. On the other side, we as a country, when it comes to our acting in the world, are also, using the all elements we think make sense of reinforcing our instruments, which are basically, apart from this, diplomatic issues, this or that, or the hard-boiled security, which we may leave aside for this moment. The majority of things with main pillars of us being able to do anything in the other fields is our ability to configure to do the messaging, to configure our image, to basically make a difference between why the US or any other country would like to deal with us, do this with us, or do us a favor instead of doing somebody else a favor, or why would they wish to engage with us? Of course, having their hard interests in taking their hard interests into account, but basically this fine cohesive tissue is provided by the results of cultural diplomacy. Basically, again, saying that we, Croatia, the welcoming country, hospitable, tourism, for example, tourism, natural beauty in a safe environment is our forte. This is something we are proud of. It's a main branch of our economy, and as you have seen the beautiful Albania. Croatia is, when you look at the map, it's further north, but it's also islands, it's also Adriatic, it's also national beauties, it's also cultural heritage, it's arts, it's the promoting tolerance, combining different identities in a kind of if you wish, let me use a religious term, in an ecumenical fashion. Croatia is a bit Mediterranean, it's a bit Southeast European, it's a bit Central European. So combining these identities to make it attractive to everybody, This is the essence of diplomacy. If you don't do that, you would not be able in the position. You would not put yourself in. If you're not doing it, if you're not doing it skillfully, if you're not paying enough attention to that, then you would not put yourself in a position to even to deal with the hard security, other issues. You would not be. You would not be adequately. Your essential messages would not be adequately wrapped. So this is, I think, that is when I got the truly the honor of speaking to this conference and the invitation by Mr. Dumfries to give a speech. I was thinking for a while, wow, this is also usually you don't think a lot theoretically about these issues, but then you realize that you are basically employing them all the time, and that they are essential to what we as diplomats do. It may be the synonym of diplomacy, and then again, when you see one country succeeding in its diplomatic initiatives, or when you see also some critical developments, then you see that what makes the difference between the success and the failure is the meaningfulness and the way how the culture of diplomacy and aka soft power has or has not been employed. So, gentlemen, ladies, thank you very much. Truly, my pleasure.
There's time for some questions. Anyone has some questions for the ambassador? Great.
Mr. Ambassador, you have been here so long. I mean, with the relations, not only as a diplomat, but before, you have experienced this transatlantic link. It is so vital for us in Europe. Don't you realize that the last year, since the election of Mr. Trump, this transatlantic link has been weakened, has been neglected by the new administration in Washington, and with their right to do so, because maybe the American interest now lies somewhere else. Europe is the old continent, and the interests are not there. Being the hard policy or soft policy, I don't see this enthusiasm for Europe. How do you feel as a member of this family who has been a product also of this transatlantic relation when it was at its best? I mean, Croatia entered as the last member of the European Union, and then you were pushed by Germany very strongly, we know that, and also very much approved by the transatlantic relation. How is the feeling today? Do you feel unease? I mean, you can see every analysis on the transatlantic relationship that shows us that we have to look somewhere else. We have to do something else. That's why the Europeans are maybe trying to do something on their own. Even Britain has been insulted by Mr. Trump when he told Mrs. May that go and make your own business or do something. And we are not used to this kind. This is contrary to all what you have told us now about cultural diplomacy. How do we proceed? Shall we make our own way? I mean, we can also make very good relations with China, which we are doing with many. But what happens to the transatlantic link? This is vital even for the US. Without the Europeans, they would be alone if they only focus on India, China, etc. How do you see it from within?
Yeah, thank you so much for your excellent question. I mean, in the first place, please.
Sorry, you represent the country where Marco Polo was born.
Yeah, exactly. Although the Italians, they think that he's from Italy, but he was working for Italy because he was big, but he was from Croatia, from Corčula.
Yeah. Where he was born.
Yeah.
To the state of Venice.
Yeah, he was.
And what I want to say is that you have a history of globalization.
Absolutely, he was.
You
Yeah.
know the Silk Road better than others.
Yeah, and you know other who was famous from Croatia? Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla is a Serb from Croatia.
Yeah.
So Nikola Tesla, we share us and Serbian friends, we share the Nikola Tesla as a genius. No, you raised an extremely important question, and at the beginning, while reading the media or reading some statements, there was some doubts whether the U.S. would put an adequate emphasis to NATO and transatlanticism. Well, that would have been disturbing for us all. I mean, I speak for Croatia, but also for the whole community of European democracies, which rely very much upon the relationship between the U.S. with the U.S. Also, the cherishing very much that relationship, which goes both ways. U.S. is giving us in my few remarks during the credentialing ceremony with President Trump, I would say that for us this is an essential. It's a very fair relationship. It's a fair deal. We think that we are having with the U.S. We appreciate immensely what the U.S. did for us in terms of bringing peace to the region during the 90s, in terms of the supporting our way to NATO, to the European Union. But also, I mean, we were playing all the time our fair share of the deal. Basically, when our American friends were approaching us, well, we need you to help us out when it comes to Afghanistan, when it comes to Iraq, when it comes to other issues. Said yes. I mean, Croatia is a small country, and you can hardly envisage that we have a kind of strategic us own interest in helping Afghanistan. But we ended up very much engaged in Afghanistan, primarily to working with our Afghan friends, helping them in everything they need to fight it out, to establish a democratic society, to be free of the foreign forces, to be able to be self-sustainable. So we understood, but it is basically also the product of us working closely with the Americans. So it's a quid pro quo. You do things for your friends. So we feel that we have been having an equitable relationship with the U.S. So any attempt of the U.S. to disengage from European affairs would be, we would think that it would be highly detrimental. And that ultimately, when you look at it truly objectively, this has not happened. What President Trump did, he very strongly reaffirmed the U.S. position in NATO. Clearly, he's asking that all allies have more equitable burden sharing. But he's not the first one. He's only voicing it more vocally. President Obama, George W. Bush, before him, every American president and every American official was asking the allies to spend more. Well, President Trump has his style, and with his style, he is urging it more forcefully. And this is. I mean, everybody understands that there should be no piggybacking there. I mean, again, U.S. is providing the backbone of the transatlantic alliance by virtue of its strength, but it cannot provide everything. So everybody has to. So that idea of the alliance being more equitable and making the European allies participate more. I mean, this is. I mean, I have to accept that my country has not yet reached the level of defense spending which we have to reach, 2%. But we have promised that we'll do that, and we are doing it as much as possible. So that message has been understood, and if your friend is telling you that this is what you need to do in order to be an adequate member of the alliance, that's what you do then, and it has been agreed. This is not something the U.S. invented. The allies themselves years ago agreed that they should reach 2%. So they should be able to respect, to live up with what they have said. So we have seen a different style, but we have not seen the change of the substance. The substance has become also the standing firm vis-a-vis Russia, all us together with the Americans. America is very much present in that endeavor, as other countries. So NATO. I was basically the chief negotiator for NATO accession over the years, and NATO is truly a beautiful alliance. And the U.S. is, I mean, it's needless to say that it is indispensable. It is the fundamental part of that alliance, and Canada, of course. But without it, you would have European defense, and European defense is building up its own identity. But it's not. I don't think that it can compete with NATO in terms of the magnitude of the size. But it comes very handy for different slot of actions. For example, when there is a necessity to intervene for some peacemaking purposes in Africa or in the Mediterranean, you don't have to have NATO doing all these things. You have to have NATO for the big thing. But when it comes to do peacekeeping, the European Union can do that beautifully. I remember the European Union was conducting a very successful. We also took part peace support operation when there was a spillover from Darfur into Chad. So the European Union put together, and the European Union presently has a mission in Mali. So NATO doesn't need to do all things. So I'm optimistic after this initial kind of seeing how it all would work out. It's working out beautifully. It's working out beautifully. Maybe trade issues and other issues will be an issue. We don't know yet. They are. But in terms of this basic transatlantic strategic common destiny, embodied in NATO, we see it functioning. We're seeing functioning with the U.S. Having its rightful, very much a leadership role, and asking certain things which are, I have to say, which are absolutely reasonable and the judicious and meaningful.
Big question, but Tom?
Hi, Mr. Ambassador. I'm Irish and I'm rather simple, and I'm not an academic, just a simple lawyer. But with regards to Croatia, is there any way you could send over any more of your great basketball players?
Yeah.
The Chicago Bulls haven't won a championship since, and I'm mispronouncing his name since he retired, but could you send
Kukoc.
athletes over
Tony
here?
Kukoc.
And then that will be incredible cultural diplomacy, and then you'll get whatever you want.
Exactly as you said. I mean, nothing matches. We have, for example, the one of the most prominent Croatian American is the guy who is the strongest guy in the world, the MMA fighter, UFC champion, heavyweight, Stipe Miocic from Cleveland, fighter from Cleveland. So he's a brand. He's our brand here in the U.S. Yes, we'll be doing our best. But the problem is that
We need
a lot of people
players on the New York Knicks.
a lot of people are leaving the country these days. So because of to search for the better economic opportunities. So we would like to keep a certain amount of people back home. They can come back. Yeah. No, nothing matches NBA.
Do you have a question? Sure.
China, we said, I think China has only Confucius, but they even not promote Confucius. Mao's Cultural Revolution, so many people died. There's no democracy in China. And China is aggressively coming to everywhere, in Africa, South America, Asia, Russia.
Economically, yeah.
Believe me, very aggressive. I maybe agree or disagree with Trump, his style or other things, so many, but some way, I think if we have I don't know how to even to counter this China's cultural aggressiveness, one belt, one road, his military kind of strategic in South East China, so many things is, which way we can counter? I mean, means, hey, there's no democracy over there. There's no freedom of expression. It's very controlled. You may have experience of the Soviet Union communism, but this one is the capital communism. Very controlled, Politburo, and we are very lucky in this country. Really, it's a rule of law and system and the democracy. European has their own. We maybe see the China, but I want to hear from you how that country is aggressively coming to everywhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know, absolutely, and you're quite right. But there is if I may say, my assessment is, China is absolutely doing it in a very assertive fashion all over the world, in Africa, in Europe, promoting businesses, business here, of course, buying things, buying companies, buying high-tech companies, economic expansion. But I would say the following: they're not very good in cultural diplomacy.
Good.
They're not very good. They enter very frequently. They enter into conflicts. There was even, I think, in New Guinea, there was a rebellion against their. They were doing some aluminium or stuff because the local community was seeing no benefits whatsoever of their presence. They were bringing people, workers from China. They were bringing foodstuff from China. They were exporting that to China. So they obviously the country as such was getting some benefits of that presence. But the citizens were not seeing any presence whatsoever. I mean, when you have a American company investing in Croatia, or it's money, but they hire locally, they become a part of the local economy, local tissue. So I would say that the Chinese are powerful. They're economically extremely dynamic. They go over the place, but they have a problem in sending their cultural message. Because if I ask you, what is the cultural message they send? I don't know. I wouldn't know what to say. During the communism, the message of the West, the message of the U.S. was that become like us and enjoy the benefits of friendship with us, or even even you may wish to come to live in the U.S. and become American. The Chinese are not saying you may emigrate and become Chinese, or they're not saying use the example of the Chinese society and establish that kind of society. That's what I mean. I don't know if they're saying that. I don't think they're saying like they would like to replicate the compatible and similar societies around the world. No, they're not doing it. So what is the cultural message they have? It's obviously they have their own interests, economic interests, maybe strategic interest, and it's money, and it's not enough. So what the Chinese are doing has limits. I would say has limits. What the limits are, and the limits are, and and certainly if you do business, for example, if you do business with the U.S., let's say, or for other matter, let's say if you do business with Russia, they send a package of support, like you are now an ally, whatever it means. And in the case of, for example, certain country doing business with China, the Chinese are not necessarily saying that we are there for you, now we are allies. No, we are simply doing transaction. And this transactional nature of the Chinese business puts a limit on their ability to truly influence the policies of the countries. But the money talks. Having said all that, we have to understand it's a big money. It's a big money. For example, we have a case in Croatia in which the Chinese company won the biggest tender to build the huge bridge, beautiful bridge, which will actually, because Croatia is geographically cut in two. Our coast is cut something like 30 kilometers. It's Bosnia, where Bosnia gets to the sea. So basically, and each time you wish to go from the north to the south to Dubrovnik, you have to pass 2 times the border. And it's during for example, tourism. It's epical queues. So basically, and there is an ability to build a large bridge bypassing and it's a huge project. And the Chinese company won and we don't know what will be happening. And the other Western companies complained that they were using the dumping price, that they're not viable. But that's how they do. I mean, if they're able to do that, they may get the job or not. But it's certainly that they are with them getting a deal, getting a business. It is not necessarily that you feel that you are getting a full package of whole friendship, like for example, I send you my aircraft, I sell you my aircraft. Now we are kind of. You simply buy things, and buying things does not necessarily. If there is a comparative advantage, then you will ultimately decide to go with somebody who is offering you more. Like if you go to the shop and if he gives you this or that, then you buy a product which is similar to the one which is maybe the same but not offering you a full package. I'm not sure that the Chinese package is particularly well wrapped up with a lot of things. But in Africa, I think in Africa they're very much present because most of other countries are absent in Africa. I have seen them in Chad. It was an amazing sight. Chad truly was not a very at the time it was very critical also, and in the biggest hotel in N'Djamena we were barely able to find hotel rooms because at the time the hotel was full of Chinese businessmen. They were building cement factory. They were doing some oil exploration. They were doing businesses in the middle of Africa, in the middle of mayhem of Darfur. So that's the Chinese, but nobody else. And the West, in the meantime, the West, us included, was spending a huge amount of money trying to stabilize the country. So I was joking with the French general at the time from the Foreign Legion, saying, you know what is my definition of our action in Africa? We are making the continent safe for the Chinese business. That was very much the case.
Join me in thanking the ambassador. Thank you so much.